Today for our roundtable. When I was called just a couple weeks ago about participating and talking about the flow of fentanyl into our country and China's role in it and everything that's happening here to our community, I jumped at the opportunity to be part of this roundtable and to lead this discussion with my friend and our next U.S. Senator, Dave McCormick. This is an issue that for me, in my time in Harrisburg, when I first got elected 9 years ago, I came in and was talking about heroin and opioids. And if you could believe, just 9 short years ago, it was not an issue that was on the front of people's minds. It was out in our communities. It was something that was out there quite substantially. But it was something that really people had not put policy pen to paper about. Myself, in my freshman year as a legislator, founded the Heroin and Opioid Prevention Education Caucus, which had not existed in Pennsylvania. I actually formed it with now Pittsburgh Mayor Ed Gainey, who was a state representative at the time, to lead a discussion that eventually became bipartisan, bicameral. We had a House Republican, House Democrat, Senate Republican, Senate Democrat, talking about how we're going to address the heroin and opioids that are flowing into our community and killing people by the hundreds, by the thousands, all across Pennsylvania. And a lot of these stories are personal for me. Just the era that I grew up in, a lot of people my age passed away, got hooked on one way or another. People that I grew up playing Little League with, playing basketball with, people that you would never think that this could affect. But it affects people from all walks of life. It doesn't discriminate who you are, where you come from, what your socioeconomic class is. People all over have been affected by this. And I can't thank you enough for bringing the attention to these issues, to lead this discussion here in my home community and in our home area here in Luzerne County, where we had the largest rate at one point for deaths per capita in the entire country, here in Luzerne County. Not a statistic that we're proud of, but one that we are going to fight against day in and day out. So it really is with the deepest humbling and true honor that my friend, a man from Bloomsburg and a military veteran and truly somebody who has gotten to be so well known in our community, West Point graduate, combat veteran, Bronze Star recipient, right? I'm not sure what else I might be missing, but truly a friend, our next U.S. Senator, Dave McCormick.
Thank you. Thank you for that really wonderful introduction. Take a minute session, then
I did. Thank you for that, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Fitzpatrick, and on behalf of Building America's Future, I'd like to welcome you to our ongoing America's Future Tour. This is a policy series launched late last year to address some of the most pressing and important issues of our time. The mission of Building America's Future is to inform and empower Americans to take ownership of our country's policy direction and demand that our government at all levels enact policy reforms to improve the lives of Americans and make America's future strong. Today, as Representative Kaufer discussed, said we are discussing the growing threat that China poses to America, specifically the role that China has played in the flow of fentanyl across America's border and into our local communities right here in Luzerne County. As a thought leader on this topic with deep experience in national security and international economic policy, we look forward to hearing from our special guest, Dave McCormick, on his perspective and how the U.S. should address this issue now and in the future. We are also lucky to be joined by a well-rounded panel of members from our local community who have firsthand experience with this topic. So with that, I think I'll kick it back to Representative Kaufer and our special guest.
Well, with that,
all right, thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn it over.
Can everybody hear me okay? Is my mic working? Terrific. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Representative Kaufer, for what a great leader you are for this community. You are going to be sorely missed, although I know this is another chapter here for you in terms of our great Commonwealth. And thank you, all of you on the panel. What a great group of people, and thank you all for coming. This is a moment for our country where we're truly challenged by a threat on the horizon in China, unlike any threat that we've had in our lifetimes. I was a soldier during the Cold War when we were talking about the USSR. This is a dramatically different kind of threat, an economic powerhouse that is threatening U.S. technology leadership with a strategy, a vision of being a techno-authoritarian power that displaces America as the sole superpower in the world. It's a military threat, a military capability that's unlike anything we've ever seen in the world, and a geopolitical threat that could ally with many of our other adversaries like Iran and others. So this is a huge threat. And in America, our leadership, really both parties, for many years has been asleep to the nature of that threat. And it's only very recently that our policymakers have started to wake up to the true challenge that China poses. And so as part of my campaign, I'm driving across the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, talking about the issues that will most affect Pennsylvanians, and one of them is how we confront China as this key adversary in the world. Outside is my bus, which I just launched this weekend. It's Fighting for Pennsylvania's Future bus. I want to encourage you all to go sign the bus on the way out, because what we're trying to do here is create a movement of Pennsylvanians, not specific to Republicans, it's across our great Commonwealth, who want to come together to put the right leadership in place to address the challenges facing our country, and top of the list is China. About 6 or 7 weeks ago, I gave a speech about China, about the threat that it posed, and I laid out 6 bans, 6 policy steps that I thought our leadership should take, and I challenged Senator Casey, my opponent. These are things he could have done, should have done, to show leadership in addressing this very profound threat. And these are bans and policies I've recommended because of our growing dependence on China, the fact that in many ways we're supporting China's growth and its capability to take on America. And in many ways, China's actions are really threatening us at our core. And I laid out 6 bans. The 6 bans were to eliminate most favored nations trading status, PNTR, for China, and removing China from the World Trade Organizations, because I made the case that China's not been following the rules. The second thing I recommended was that we stop growing our dependence on China with all these huge programs the Biden administration's put in place, Senator Casey's voted for solar panels and lithium batteries. Ironically, at a time where we should be less dependent on China, we're becoming more dependent on China because of this huge push and making our supply chains dependent on China at a time when China's increasingly an adversary. I made the argument that we should ban purchases of farmland across our great Commonwealth and across our country. China's buying up millions of acres of farmland, which threatens our food security and also poses other threats. I made the case that America should stop allowing companies and allowing investors to invest in China in a way that's going to support China's military capability, in a way that's going to support the Communist Party. We literally have investors in the Silicon Valley that are investing in artificial intelligence companies that do business day in and day out with the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. I made the argument that we should have China expelled from the World Health Organization, that we should withdraw from the World Health Organization because the World Health Organization made such a terrible step in terms of how it addressed COVID and really gave China a lot of cover for its lack of transparency. Clearly, COVID originated in Wuhan. We still don't know how that happened. China's not been very transparent about it. This was a global calamity that killed millions of Americans, millions of people across the globe, and cost trillions of dollars. We still don't have a reckoning of how that occurred. And the 6th thing I recommended was a full-throated strategy to stop the flow of fentanyl, which originates in China. The basic ingredients originate in China. It comes into Mexico. It's manufactured in Mexico. It comes across our wide open southern border, and in a couple days, it finds itself through the cartel's distribution network in small communities like this one, in large communities. I just came from Philadelphia this morning. Our great Commonwealth is under siege from this fentanyl crisis, and so is America. More than 4,000 deaths last year alone in our Commonwealth from opioids, primarily fentanyl, More than 4,000. Can you believe it? In 20 years of war in Afghanistan and Iraq, we lost roughly 4,000 killed in action. I mean, this is unbelievable. 106,000 in America more broadly. Think about it. If you were sitting in the capitals of one of our adversaries, Tehran, Moscow, potentially Beijing, and you were thinking, what could we do that would be hugely disruptive to America? Well, we might invent this thing called fentanyl. We might find a way to get it into the communities. It would not only create a huge toll with many people lost. In many communities, I ask, hey, how many people in this room have been affected by fentanyl, lost someone to fentanyl? In most rooms, 50% of the hands go up, either their immediate family or their friend group. So it's having a huge burden, but it's also a huge economic burden. It's also a huge a burden that I hope we'll talk about today in terms of combating addiction and how you help people transition back to healthy lives. I know we have a lot of expertise on our panel to talk about that today. So this is an enormous burden on our country, an enormous threat to our health and our security across our great Commonwealth, and it's the direct result of failed leadership, failed policies on the part of President Biden, and with the support every step of the way of my opponent, Bob Casey. And let me be more specific about that. This is a crisis that has grown over many years. It's something that's been obvious. And in the last 3 years, the Biden administration has done virtually nothing to deal with it in terms of holding China to account. They started a high-level dialogue a couple months ago, which hasn't yielded anything. And this is the kind of thing where we really need to hold China accountable. Second, the border policies of the Biden administration, again, which Senator Casey has supported every step of the way, have led to an incredible surge in the number of illegal immigrants coming across our borders, something like 10 million illegal entrants over the last 3 years of the Biden administration, at a time when President Biden had complete authority to stop that flow or make dramatic reductions in that flow, as was done under the Trump administration, and has failed to do so, and again, with the support of Senator Casey every step of the way. So this is something that has to be addressed immediately. It's something, as a senator, I would make a top priority. We need to treat this as the national security threat it is. We need to interdict that flow of fentanyl ingredients into Mexico and into the United States. We need to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigration across our borders. It's highly concentrated, as all of you know. It's highly addictive. It's extremely cheap. And so the drug cartels and the drug dealers love this as a way to further hook their customers with profound and terribly dangerous implications for our community. So I'm really happy to be here today to be able to elevate the importance of this issue to Pennsylvanians, the importance of this issue to our country, and the importance of this issue for your next senator. Senator Casey, early this year, January, and we're in February, early this year, came out with his fentanyl in election year, his fentanyl proposal. And I think that's indicative of the kind of leadership we shouldn't have, the kind of leadership that's looking to make headlines in election years as opposed to do the hard work of leading against some of the more fundamental threats facing our country and facing our Commonwealth. I can't think of one that's more profound, more serious, and one that requires more dramatic action than this fentanyl crisis. So really delighted to be here, delighted to hear from others about this, but I can't think of anything more important, and I'm so grateful that we have this great lineup of public officials and experts to take on this issue.
And thank you. And as you said, we had quite an incredible panel that we put together here today. And, I want to just sort of give some of the ideas of things to talk about, and we're going to go around and introduce ourselves here. Some of the things that we're going to talk about is about the flow of fentanyl in the United States, China's role in that, how fentanyl is affecting our state and local communities, as well as what can be done to combat this at local levels. I'm going to start here with our district attorney, Sam Sanguadolci for Luzerne County. Been our district attorney for, I don't know how many years now. I've lost track of them. But Sam, why don't you get us started on this?
Sure. As Aaron said, I'm Sam Sanguadolci. I've been the district attorney here for almost 4 years, and I've been a prosecutor in Luzerne County since 2002. had the honor of serving as an assistant district attorney prosecuting mostly drug crimes with Chief Kochik, who was then in the trenches, and Detective Polka, who worked for Kingston and still worked for Kingston, but made it a policy in Kingston that we're going to seek the maximum penalty for trafficking in things like cocaine, heroin, methamphetamines, and we actually saw that reach a pretty successful conclusion in many, many cases, to the point where we would actually catch drug traffickers on wiretaps saying that they would not come to Kingston to deliver because the sentences became so harsh. So that's a testament both to the work of these two with the Kingston Police Department, but also to the fact that harsh sentences work. So we see fentanyl, we've graduated somehow from heroin to fentanyl, and it's all over. It's in every drug we test, whether it's intentional or it's cross-contamination. We're seeing it in marijuana joints. So you think that's a safe drug that you can try out as a high school student or a college student, and it's killing children to the point of over 200 overdose deaths in Luzerne County every year. So I'm happy to be a part of this panel. I'm happy to speak to the effects on our community, but by way of introduction, those are some of the things that we've seen from both a local municipal level and a county level.
And to Sam's right, we also have our county council chair and professional firefighter, John Lombardo, is here. John, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is John Lombardo. I'm the chairman of Luzerne County Council. I was recently elected in 2021. I served for 2 years as the vice chair of county council, and this January, in our reorganization, I became the chair of council. And although Luzerne County does certainly, as Aaron said, have one of the highest opioid death rates in the nation, certainly in the state, I actually didn't agree to be on this panel because I'm the chair of county council. I agreed because of my full-time job as a first responder. I have seen firsthand on the streets on an almost daily basis what happens when our youth is affected by opioids. I can name you 1,000 examples of situations I've been in where, I've seen people I know, friends. I've had a coworker that actually passed away from an opioid overdose, and it's something that has been very, very horrible for this area, for Northeast Pennsylvania. We are just looking for any way possible to try to resolve the situation. And certainly, Mr. McCormick, I certainly hope that you get elected because our current senator is just not performing. And we really need leadership here. And it's been very sad and very tough. And I know that Representative Coffer and Cabell have been working to get some increased funding for our fire and EMS services, which will certainly help. So we really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We have Kingston Borough Police Department Chief Rich Kochik here with us as well. Chief?
Good morning. I've been employed with the Kingston Police Department for 25 years, and 15 of those years I spent in narcotics with Detective Polka. So we've seen the range where it started with cocaine and heroin, and we watched as everything changed over the last few years with fentanyl and crystal meth. Myself and Detective Polka, we're not here on any political agendas. We're here to speak the facts of what we've seen on the streets, what we see on the streets, and inform everybody of, what's really going on out there. I don't believe it's not safe for anyone buying street drugs right now to not have a thought in their head that the drug may be laced with fentanyl. We have had overdose deaths, and one of them included being a marijuana joint, or where it was actually the person died and it was laced with fentanyl, and that's what was the reason for their death. The flow of fentanyl coming into this country, I've never seen anything like it. The fight that we have put on for many years, it hasn't gotten any easier. Detective Polka will speak a little bit in detail to that. 4 years ago, I left narcotics and took the chief's position, but I stand where I always stood on the war on drugs, especially what we're seeing today. The fentanyl and the methamphetamine coming through Mexico has become unbelievable. I think These District Attorney Sangalducci did speak about a lot of the other factors, some of them being family, but, I will get into that in a little while in reference to how we see things and how we should see things going in the future.
Next,
Do you mind if I ask, Chief, are you seeing gang activity? Like, what is the distribution network look like, and how has that changed, in your opinion, in recent years?
There's definitely gang activity in our state and in our county, and that has increased quite a bit over the last few years. And a lot of the majority of the distribution is coming from gangs. And obviously with gangs and drugs, you have violence that also has become, we're seeing a lot of violence, a lot of shootings, and a lot of homicides.
and I think that's a good transition over to Detective Edward Palka, the detective, to speak about what you were partners with the chief for 15 years, as we joked before coming up here, longer than most marriages these days. But if you could give a little bit of your background on this as well.
My name's Detective Edward Polka. I've been a Kingston police officer since 1998 and part of the Luzerne County Drug Task Force since 2000. I was specialized into narcotics in 2005 when I became a detective, and I've stayed there since. I've seen from, like the chief said, going from heroin and cocaine to strictly fentanyl. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen heroin. The cases that we have now have no heroin. I haven't seen heroin in actually over a year. It's just been straight fentanyl. I believe that's due to the ease of manufacturing. You don't need the poppy plants and things, the opium for heroin. You just need to get man-made chemicals. I have personally never had any cases that went back to China. My stuff stops in Mexico, but we do have instances where somebody would overdose in Kingston, follow it to the next person. That person deals from Pittston, and then that person gets their stuff from somebody in Wilkes-Barre, who gets it from Philadelphia, who gets it directly from the cartels down in Mexico. So we have had cases that have gone that far. We've arrested cartel members coming from Mexico up to our area, and that seems to be the trend now. The drug trafficking organizations, there's a lot of Mexican cartels members that are here, not necessarily in street gangs like the Bloods and Crips and things, although they are extremely prevalent in our area. So it just seems to go from Mexico to the different gangs and drug trafficking organizations here, and then it goes on to our streets. One of the questions I was asked prior to is the range of people it affects, and it affects everyone, poverty-stricken to very wealthy, people that are young to people that are old. However, we don't get a lot of older people here just because of the fact that if you're on fentanyl too long, you're dead. You don't make it to be an old person. So I would say that the demographic is mostly younger, but that's just because if you stay on it for too long, you're not going to get the chance to get older.
And it's amazing. We see it in the news, talking about the border and seeing what's happening there, and really how it affects, having the drugs directly of what you're talking about come from, the border, our southern border, and then be here is really how it affects our community here in northeastern Pennsylvania, thousands of miles away from our southern border. It's amazing to think of the impact that has in our area, just from your experience. That's
Aaron, just so you guys are aware, when it comes to the officers, every officer in my department is equipped with fentanyl, or I'm sorry, with
Narcan.
Narcan, with Narcan, and they use it a lot. They've saved a lot of lives, but it's a requirement now. You have to have Narcan, and you're supplied with it, and you have to have it on you at all times.
And we're really lucky here to have Shayna Stefanik, who is the National Director of Business Development for STR Behavioral Health. Thank you, Shayna. If you could please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Shayna Stefanik. Like Representative Coffer said, I'm the National Director of Business Development as my career choice. But more importantly, I'm a woman in long-term recovery. So I heard many good things mentioned about timelines and the change from heroin to fentanyl. And I'll be coming up on 9 years of sobriety. And it's funny that you mentioned that timeline because that's exactly when the change started to happen. There is no more heroin on the streets. It is pure fentanyl. And I'm here to help with like the stigma and the understanding that, the individual is not going from, something to maybe smoking weed to using fentanyl. It's actually starting with pressed pills, so that are coming from China. An individual, especially our youth, it's the teens are the prime age to experiment with substances, marijuana, weed, pills, whatever that looks like. And unfortunately, they're experimenting once and dying because the pill was ordered online or whatever that looks like, and it contains fentanyl, which is extremely deadly. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Last but not least, my colleague, Representative Mike Cabell, who has an extensive background in this field. Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you to Dave. Dave's been, this is the second time that I've seen him in Luzerne County. I could say that's more in 1 week than I've seen Bob Casey in Luzerne County in over a year. So thank you, Dave, for spending so much time here and recognizing that this is an important part of Pennsylvania's. My background is in behavioral health care, is in addiction. So I co-founded Silver Pines Treatment Center back in 2016. Shana was one of our first employees, actually. I have a unique experience and background where, as a policymaker and having a former background understanding behavioral health and addiction, it really drives the way we make decisions. Being on the Human Services Committee, it's really powerful to be able to bring that voice to the legislature. So I also want to talk a little bit quickly about how I'm really excited. This is a prime example of how policy and how discussion should happen top down. We have, hopefully our next U.S. Senator, state. We have community shareholders, county, and municipal. This is how we solve problems. So I'm unbelievably excited to be here, and thank you for everyone who's here sharing.
So, let me bring us back together. We'll start the discussion here that everybody's now had a first chance, and I'm going to put our special guest here on the spot first here. We got to hear a little bit from some of our testifiers here, and I want to recognize our host, Building America's Future, who brought us here together to discuss China and specifically how the CCP has their influence on the drug crisis that we have right now. And we're seeing it flow through our southern border. What actions can we, what does America need to do right now to stop the fentanyl from coming into our country, killing thousands of Americans each year here in northeastern Pennsylvania? What can we do from a policy standpoint that can help us address this issue?
Well, I think there's what we need to do here at home, which I'm not going to touch on because I want to hear from others here and get some real insight. But I think in terms of internationally, we need to put an enormous amount of focus, pressure, and elevate the dialogue, elevate the action around stopping the flow of these ingredients from China. So what's happening, as I said, is the ingredients, for the most part, are coming into Mexico, and then the fentanyl is manufactured in Mexico. So step one is interdiction. Step one is sanctions. Step one is dealing with China, and elevating this issue is one of the, if not the most significant issue facing Americans. Think of it almost like the kind of action that we took when after 9/11 at the terrorist threat coming into our borders. Well, think about what fentanyl is doing. It's killing 106,000 Americans a year. I mean, how much more of a threat do you need to see to elevate this as one of the most consequential points of conflict and needed action as it relates to the Chinese? To the point of thinking about how we use our Coast Guard, our various law enforcement to ensure that we interdict those chemical ingredients from coming into the country. So part of this is U.S.-China. The other part of this is the southern border, which seems so obvious, but that's where the preponderance, that's where the large majority of fentanyl, manufactured fentanyl, comes into the country. And part of that comes through actual legal entry points hidden in a variety of ways, and much of it comes through illegal entry points. And the amount of illegal immigration has grown dramatically under the last 3 years of the Biden administration, and that's because of bad policy. It's because of bad policy choices. The president has an enormous amount of authority that he could exercise right now to stop that flow. There was legislation proposed in the Senate last week. That legislation, in my opinion, while well-intentioned, was deeply flawed and would have codified essentially more than 1.5 million illegal immigrants applying for amnesty, with the majority of them coming into the United States. So I thought that was a well-meaning but bad proposal. But we do need good legislation to take the next step in terms of closing the border. But make no mistake, the president has a lot of authorities he could use right now. Those are the two things. And then there's a third piece, which comes to creating vibrant communities, creating the right opportunity where people don't turn to drugs as a way of trying to deal with the uncertainty or the lack of opportunity in their lives. And there's also a whole set of policy responses that I'm anxious to hear from others about how we deal with this horrible addiction and help people transition back to become productive members of our community. But on the keeping fentanyl out, it's China and the southern border, and there's a lot we can do tomorrow. We just haven't done it because we haven't had the right leadership in place.
Well, I'm going to ask a quick follow-up question, then I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Representative Cabell. But, just as a follow-up, I think a lot of times people have a hard time connecting the dots between China, Mexico, our southern border, and how that affects northeastern Pennsylvania. Do you think people are having a hard time understanding that? And how does that, because it seems like such a far leap, right? To go from a country across the ocean from us, an adversary, to our southern border, then to northeastern Pennsylvania and Luzerne County. Obviously you're helping connect the dots here. How difficult are you finding it for people to be able to understand how the flow of how that impacts us here in Pennsylvania?
Well, once people hear it, they connect all the dots and it makes sense. I just don't think people are hearing enough. I was to hear the detective talk about how he traces it back. It's 2 steps and you're with the Mexican cartels. I mean, that is so telling to us who live here in northeastern Pennsylvania. I mean, Columbia County is not far from here where I grew up, and one of my best friends from high school is the sheriff in Scott Township, and this is front of mind for him. This is what he's dealing with every day. His officers carry Narcan in the same way yours do, but there also is potential physical risk to them if they come in contact with the fentanyl as part of the bus. So this is like, we're living with it in our communities, and I think we need to do a better job, and which is what I think we're trying to do today, of making sure people can connect the dots of how insidious it is, how much it means to them, and it's directly the result of the actions or actions we're taking or not taking in dealing with these 2 prominent issues, the border and our relationship with China. And, the amazing thing about the southern border is the degree to which I went to the southern border during my last campaign. I literally stood on one side of the Rio Grande with the Border Patrol. They pointed up into the hedgerow, and you could see folks in the cartels pushing people across. And most of the people that are coming across have some sort of obligation to the cartels in some form or another. And in 48 hours, they're released, waiting for an amnesty trial, which will take place, 3 years from now. And in 48 hours, the cartels have a network that moves this all across the United States. And of course, the bulk of the population of the United States is within 300 miles of where we're sitting. And so it's coming straight here. This is the red hot center of where they want to distribute. And then it ends up, going down Route 80 or Route 81 or 76 into our communities. So it's important that Pennsylvanians realize that failure at the national level is what you're seeing in your communities. When you say you have close friends that died, it's the direct result of bad policy as it relates to China and Mexico. And that's the dots I'm trying to connect, because it's something a United States Senator can do a lot about. This is in the sweet spot of where a United States Senator can show leadership, and that's what I'll do.
Thank you. I'm going to kick it over to Representative Cabell. What some of your thoughts?
Sure, thank you. So, Dave, you mentioned how as a U.S. Senator, this is the type of levers you could pull, the things you could do in order to help. As a state legislator, there's not much we could do at the U.S.-Mexico border. We did send a letter to Governor Shapiro recently urging him to support Governor Abbott in his declaration of being invaded at the southern border. Hopefully we'll get a response there soon. But I want to talk a little bit about the actual levers you can pull and the things you can do to stop the flow of fentanyl. Obviously, we know most of it is coming through the Mexican border. Some of it's coming through the U.S. Postal Service too. It's literally making its way, as Shana mentioned, through press pills, that kind of thing. But do you look at this as because I think part of the problem too is there's not much diplomatic relations between us and China anymore. There's and it is an invasion, and it's an existential threat. And to your point, like, it's a brilliant one. If we were going to attack someone, you don't even need to send soldiers over there to kill, how many people died in 9/11? 4,000, 20, 30 times that in a year. So do you see this as like a diplomatic option here or law enforcement? Or what do you think the best way to handle this?
Well, I think it's there's a lot of common differences. There's a lot of differences with the United States and China. There's a lot of common interest, and so the most important thing is to elevate this in terms of one of the, if not the most significant issue in terms of our current challenges with China, and make sure they understand. And then I think it's the kind of thing where we probably need to take action in terms of elevating the risk, elevating the actions we'll take against interdicting this coming across our borders or coming into Mexico from China, and really put enormous pressure on the shipping lanes, all the pressures, all the vehicles by which the ingredients might enter Mexico. I don't think it's diplomatic in the traditional sense. I think this is an issue of such national security significance that we need to treat it as such. And I don't think the tone or the actions that the Biden administration has taken are consistent with that level of urgency and threat. And I think the same is similar with Mexico. So I'm, as you know, I'm a former soldier. I take the use of military force very seriously, and I think it's very important to be thoughtful about how we do that. But I think these drug cartels are such a threat that we should consider also, hopefully in concert with the Mexican government, of taking limited military action to stop the cartels from pushing fentanyl into across our borders, and that's something that happened to some degree in the drug wars in Colombia, where U.S. forces supported that. I think we need to think about that as that. I think that the consequences of not stopping this are so large that we need to sort of break the glass in terms of the actions we would consider. So when you start to talk about it as a national security threat, let's call it a battle against terrorists that would kill 100,000 Americans a year. We'd say, let's deploy the 82nd Airborne, right? We now have a war that's killing 106,000 Americans a year, 4,000 Pennsylvanians last year, and I don't hear anyone, frankly, or not enough people saying that's a war we got to fight with all our powers, and this is no joke. So that's how I
Thank you, and I'm confident you're the person to help us lead this charge. So thank you, great answer.
I'm going to switch over. We're going to go from the state level now to our county perspective here. I'm going to turn it over to our DA to give some perspective on where if you want to jump in here, Sam.
Well, I would like to jump in for several reasons. I think, number one, universally, the tone about addiction has changed for the better in that sense. I think 10, 15 years ago when we would talk about it, it was always, it was somebody else that happened to. It was somebody who got themselves in that situation, and it wasn't hitting that close to home. And partly because of the opioid epidemic, I think largely because of the opioid epidemic. Unfortunately, it brought it home to where now everybody knows somebody that is affected by it. And on one hand, I think that's positive. We're getting people the help they need. We can't, it's become almost a cliche now, can't arrest our way out of the problem. On the other hand, directly to the point that Representative Cabell and Dave are talking about, there are people that should be blamed. So this influx, it was by deliberate design to get people addicted. I firmly believe that we went from heroin to fentanyl, which is extremely cheap to manufacture and extremely easy to manufacture, and is now killing people in record numbers. So I think those people, right from the traffickers, which our office can have something to do with, our local police department, our county can have something to do with, we need to see bigger penalties for the people that traffic in these drugs, right all the way up to the cartels and perhaps government officials in other countries that are encouraging this to cross our border and make it, listen, we're not close to the Mexican border. We're almost as far as you could get in the United States, and yet it's a daily problem that we have to deal with that's costing our taxpayers millions of dollars in resources, both to help fight addiction and for the law enforcement and first responder perspectives. So I think people need to be held accountable, and we need to see a leadership that will do that.
Well, Chief, I saw you writing notes as he was talking too, so go
Well,
ahead.
I'll just touch base on being held accountable. We always enforced school zones in our area. And that was, Sam was an assistant DA. We were just getting rolling in narcotics. And that was a big thing for us because Kingston is filled with schools. So everywhere you turned, there was a school or a playground, and drug dealers obviously had nowhere else to sell. They had to sell in these school zones. There was mandatory sentences that applied to all these, and we enforced them heavily. I think when we mapped it out, I mean, there was very little of Kingston that wasn't a school zone or a playground in the area, and our sentences, every one of them was getting sentenced to mandatory minimum sentences, and then they did away with it. And I believe Sam would be able to answer why, but they did away with that, and that was probably back in 2000, maybe 15, Ed?
Oh, at least, yeah.
Yes.
So
that resulted from appellate cases, the way that was written. They decided those factors to give mandatory sentences had to go to a jury, and it was never fixed in the legislature. And I call upon our legislature to fix it. I can't think of a good reason, unless you're a veterinarian treating an animal the size of an elephant, to lawfully possess fentanyl. If you're trafficking in fentanyl, there should be a lengthy sentence so that you don't become a problem on the streets of Luzerne County any time in the near future. And I think it's incumbent upon us, we do see cases where people suffering from substance abuse will sell a little to try to support their habit. That is not difficult for people to discern. So the people that are trafficking for profit in major quantities, they need to be put in jail for lengthy periods of time. Those long sentences do work. It helps us push these drugs outside of Luzerne County and hopefully outside of the state of Pennsylvania.
And we, the narcotics division that currently operates out of Kingston now, we're part of the Luzerne County Drug Task Force. We're also attached to agencies like ATF, connected with DEA, what have you. We follow the leads that we have. Every death, every overdose death that we come across, we investigate until we can't investigate anymore. And the detectives that do that currently, if there's something to go on, we will investigate. And if we can arrest you, and we've followed the chain, and we've arrested several people involved in a death of someone that overdosed on fentanyl. So we will do that, and that's something I think, Sam and I have talked about in length in reference to continuing that practice and holding the people accountable for what's going on.
So just very quickly, Ned, you were telling me some of the statistics between 2000 till now, or roughly now. What were those numbers that we saw in what you've seen?
So in 2010, Chief has us fill out a stat form every year and what we confiscate and what we don't. In 2010, we roughly confiscated, I think it was 3,600 bags of heroin. Roughly 50 bags will equal 1 gram. So that's probably about 74, 75 grams of heroin that we confiscated in 2010. In 2022, we confiscated 5,700 grams of heroin. So an astronomical, it wasn't heroin, it was fentanyl.
Fentanyl, yeah.
So it was a astronomical.
Those numbers are huge.
From 74 grams in 2010 to
In 12 years.
5,700 grams. It's a huge spike. One of the things that they were touching on, one of the things I get aggravated with is when you hear the jails are filled with people that are just have a problem. That's really not the case. We have, the district attorney's office has gone through a lot of research and done a lot of programs. One of the pilot programs they started was to get the people that need help, people that are using and not dealing, they're just using and in danger of dying, they end up getting deferred prosecution. I believe that our case was one of the first cases that we put a husband and wife in there. They ended up accepting the program. If you don't complete the program, then you get the charges filed on you and you do get probation. These people went through it and now are speaking at things like this. That stuff works, you know, and the harsh sentences, they also work, but they're not for the people that are using.
Detective, do you have a treatment court in Luzerne? I know there's a
Yes,
treatment court.
absolutely.
Okay, so there's
Absolutely.
treatment court in Lackawanna too. And has that been effective? Like what-
Absolutely. But that's up to the individual.
You
to
gotta
make
wanna,
it
you gotta
effective.
wanna,
If
you
if
gotta
you're not-
wanna be clean, you gotta wanna help yourself, you gotta wanna get off.
Right.
I think that's the
Yeah,
big
if you're
thing
not
to
at that
reference.
point, then it's not going to help you. That's an individual decision, but at least we're trying to make it so that it's available to them.
It's a choice.
So one of the things through Kingston, District Attorney Sangolchi said before was, we intercepted a call last year, and the call was, I am never, effing never going through Kingston again. Never. And that's great. We love
That's the
to hear
kind of
that,
call you
know what I
want
mean?
to hear, right?
But because of the efforts of the district attorney's office, and then now we're attached to federal agencies like I'm part of ATF, we're able to, the district attorney's office and the U.S. attorney's office are working together to get these people that are bringing kilos upon kilos of fentanyl into our area, sentences where they're 15, 20-year sentences. And people know that Kingston itself, their law enforcement community is attached to these federal agencies, and they're going to go after that, and they stay out. They do the best that they can to stay out of Kingston, which is fantastic. We're here to try to support the people that need it and to get the help that they deserve. And if they want it, we're trying to do the best we can to get it to them. And then the people that are giving it to them, the dealers, the traffickers that are telling the users, hey, you're not buying quite enough, what's up? You know, you should be buying more. Like, we need to get this stuff rolling. Those are the people we want to put away for a long time.
Well, and I think that's a perfect transition to get us to Shayna. And by the way, can we please give a round of applause to Shayna for 9 years of recovery?
Almost 9 years.
Almost
Let's not,
9.
You know, let's not.
One
do
day
that.
at a time, right?
Just for today.
But here, you know, we're talking about drug treatment courts and solutions that work in recovery. And you know, what barriers do we see out there? What if you can expand upon
Sure.
your experience about what you see of what we can do, because we don't celebrate the recovery and success stories enough. And God bless you for being willing to come here and to participate. Seriously, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I'm hearing like, you know, the judicial system and law enforcement and what it's like to be on that side of it. But as a woman who, you know, has been on the other side of it and now gets has the privilege of working into treatment, I've seen everything. And you know, we can prosecute, you know, the dealers, the traffickers, rightfully so. The big piece that we're missing is like the education part and being extremely vocal about it. I am not one of those people that was, you know, homeless, living under a bridge. I had the house, the husband, the kids, the white picket fence, and still became a heroin addict. You know, and that's it. The stigma is a big piece. So we've made, you know, especially in Luzerne and Lackawanna County, leaps and bounds treating the individual who's suffering from the substance use disorder, offering them, you know, a chance to go to treatment, long-term treatment. The average, you know, 28-day stay inpatient isn't enough. This is a disease that I could speak on, that I battle every single day and will battle for the rest of my life. It's easier, though, you know, when I have the tools and the resources to deal with that, to deal with my disease. Unfortunately, you know, we can be really strict in I love that nobody will come to Kingston, right? But where else are they going to go? They're going to go somewhere else. When we think that we're 3 steps ahead, you know, the cartels, the drug dealers are 5 steps ahead. And what it looks like now, too, is we're talking about fentanyl, is trank dope. I don't know if if anybody has seen that up here as much as I've seen it more in the southern parts of Pennsylvania. Tranq dope is Narcan resistant, so you're trying to help someone, a medic is trying to reverse that overdose, and they're dying anyway. So talking about it, not having it be a secret, not judging other individuals who, have a family member or went through it themselves. I am not someone that practices anonymity in my recovery. I didn't practice my using in anonymity. Everybody knew I was using, and I had consequences from that. So, and I could tell, we were talking about the traffic and everything coming into Philly, working in the treatment capacity that I do, I cover, the whole state of Pennsylvania, and then I go north a little bit into New York, and I can tell you where there's a shortage and where there's an influx just by where my clients for treatment are coming from. So you're right on the spot with how it's coming in. Right now I'm getting a little bit of an influx from Western Pennsylvania, which means either there's a huge influx or there's a shortage. So people are more willing to seek treatment. It just begins with the conversation, and it's, I have two grown children, 19 and 20 years old, and my kids are completely aware that I'm in recovery. My kids were only 10 and 11 when I got sober, so they grew up very different, very in the know on both sides of it for their entire life, and they're advocates for what I do and what we do, but a lot of families are not having that conversation. There is no experimenting anymore, unfortunately. There is no I went and had a couple of drinks with my friends. It's leading to more issues. There's also a big issue with, the younger youth who have children who are overdosing and dying, and now the grandparents or another caregiver are raising those children, and then the cycle just continues. So, I think utilizing individuals like myself and the thousands upon thousands of other people who have found recovery, letting us have a voice to support your mission, it's win-win.
And Dave, I'm not sure if you want to quickly touch on this. We have a few minutes left, and about recovery works, right? And kudos, Shayna, for what you do, and Mike, and your professional career prior to being elected. Dave, what do you think about how we address the stigma about the issue and about people seeking help and recovery?
Yeah.
Anything with that?
Well, I think that you're the perfect example. So I think it's thank you. And thank you again, the leadership to speak openly that this is something that could hijack any of our lives. It's so incredibly addictive. You can get access to it and be drawn into addiction in lots of different ways, and that the courage to embrace the addiction and then embrace recovery and speak openly about it is, I think, the way that we'll find our path out of reducing the stigma. So you're the perfect example of the kind of leadership we need. One of the things, I was in Westmoreland County last year, and I was talking to some folks about this topic, and one of the things they mentioned was they had great recovery facility and great track record, but it had, or actual legislation to working in some sort of collaborative way, as we're talking about here. But if there's anything that you would want to leave me with of the kind of leadership you'd like to see on this topic, I would welcome that. I'd love to know more about capacity to deal with the addiction crisis, but also just advice in general from all of you who are living with this day to day.
Close the border.
Yeah.
That would be one thing in Mexico. It's so many of the drugs, that's where they're coming from, and we seriously need a better immigration policy than we have right now.
The flow of narcotics coming into the country is unbelievable, but we also, I think, need to take a look at education. There is no longer, and I'm going to go on the first levels of education. There's barely any funding for DARE programs, narcotics, teaching kids. That early age, I still think, plays a role. Of course, not everyone is going to follow what you teach them, but I believe that education is important. And also, funding, more funding to fight the battle, to go after the people involved in selling and pushing this stuff through our communities. There really isn't a lot of funding out there to assist with that, and your hands do get tied.
Yeah.
Well, we have to begin to wrap it up here. I do see that we're right at the 12 o'clock deadline here, and so I want to just give a couple, clearly from our discussion, there's no magic silver bullet, right? It takes a lot of what we're talking about between the flow from China, the southern border, between what we're seeing in our communities and law enforcement and education and recovery programs. There's a lot that this all comes into, and I just want to leave you, Dave, with if you have any last final thoughts here before we
Yeah.
wrap this up. And once again, let's give Dave a round of applause for joining us here today.
Thank you.
And for our incredible
Thank you.
panel here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for moderating. What a great panel. I want to again thank Building America's Future for organizing and underwriting these dialogues, because I think it couldn't be more important. I want to thank this incredible panel. I mean, what a great, it's like perfect in terms of people with different perspectives actually know a lot about the details of how this is destroying our communities, how fentanyl is destroying our communities and what to do about it. So thank you for that. Thank you, those of you who have come in the audience to participate. Yeah, I just want to leave you with I guess this is a political statement, but it's more of an American statement, which is, people always get around election year say, this is the most important election of your lifetime. This is the one. This is the one. But I want to ask you, particularly those of you a little long in the tooth like me, to think about your life and ask yourself whether there's ever been a more important election. I don't think so. And there's all sorts of reasons that most Pennsylvanians think the country's going in the wrong direction. It's not a Republican-Democrat thing. Both parties, 80% of Pennsylvanians, 80% of Americans think the country's going in the wrong direction. So this is the moment to engage. This is the moment to participate. This is the moment to be part of a movement to get the right leadership in place to take our great Commonwealth and our great country in the right direction. And so I take all of your participation today as a reflection of your feeling that, the need to engage, and thank you for that. I'm going to do everything I can to help lead the charge with the kind of policies, the kind of dialogue, the kind of leadership that we've had today, because that's what it's going to take to fix our country, and that's what it's going to take to solve these incredibly difficult, intractable problems like fentanyl. It's going to take leadership, and we've got great examples of it up here on this stage with this group of people. Thank you all very much.
Well, hey, we have to wrap it up. We're on a timeline.
I'll come
here.
back and see you.
Well,
Thank you.
I just want to thank everybody once again, Building America's Future, putting this together. Thank you once again to our panelists. We're at our time restriction here, and thank you once again to our special guest, Dave McCormick, for being here.